India rolls out the red carpet for US President Barack Obama as the two leaders look to find common ground on several pressing topics. We'll go live to New Delhi with all those developments. ISIS claims to have killed one of the Japanese hostages in its custody, and now a new demand is in order to spare the second captive. We'll have reaction just ahead. And Greeks head to the polls to cast a vote for their financial future. We'll tell you what's at stake. Welcome to our viewers in the US and around the world. I'm Lynda Kinkade. Let's get straight to the top stories. We begin in India, where US President Barack Obama is visiting for a second time to cement relations between the two countries. Right now, he's meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. India and the United States have strong economic and cultural ties, but relations between the two countries became strained in recent years. There are disagreements about climate, trade and US connections with India's rival Pakistan. But the Indian and American leaders have warm personal relations. They hope to translate that friendship into diplomatic progress. CNN's White House correspondent Michelle Kosinski is travelling with the President Obama, and she joins us now from New Delhi. Michelle, firstly, the President has described the friendship between the US and India as one of the defining relationships of the 21st century. Is that what you've witnessed so far?
Right. I mean, we've heard the White House talk about this for months now, especially when Prime Minister Modi, shortly after he was elected, I mean, one of the first big trips he made was to the United States. He spent about a week there visiting different locations, spending quite a lot of time with President Obama. So we saw that represented there, even though there was that controversy over Modi not really having a visa to be in the U.S., of course, as head of state, that nullifies that, and he's certainly able to visit. But this time around, with President Obama visiting India, it's really significant because this is the first time that a foreign head of state has been the special guest of honor for Republic Day, India's Independence Day. So India is excited about that. They see that as extremely significant. And I think symbolically, nothing represented that more as when President Obama arrived at the airport early this morning, and he was greeted by the Prime Minister. That wasn't expected. And not only that, the Prime Minister then greeted him with a big hug. So I think that is a pretty representative way to get these 2 days of talks started. So right now they're in their bilateral meeting. It's expected to last about an hour, and shortly after that we'll hear remarks from both sides. We don't expect them to take questions, which is interesting and also disappointing, but we'll hear what each has to say, Linda.
It was indeed a very warm reception this morning, Michelle. And of course, even before the first official meeting between the two leaders, Indian media reported that negotiators had struck a deal on civilian nuclear trade. What can you tell us about that?
Right. That's a big deal, that this is going to be greater cooperation, also U.S. products coming into India. I mean, that's really been a point that cooperation is necessary. Also, trade has been a big piece of this. Again, we've been hearing the White House talk about the need for greater cooperation. You mentioned the climate. That's another area where they really want to make progress. I mean, it just seems like both sides have not been able to stress enough how much they want this relation to grow over coming years. I mean, India is the world's biggest democracy. The U.S. is a superpower. They want to be able to find agreement on this. And one thing that's been able to progress this is that the U.S. sees Modi as something of a reformer. They feel that he is committed to reforms. Of course, some of this remains to be seen. He is the new prime minister, but they feel that he is committed to economic and social reforms in the area of energy and housing and development. They think that the U.S. can play a role and that they can find cooperation beyond those obvious points of interest, Linda.
There is certainly a lot to discuss there in New Delhi. Michelle Kosinski, thanks so much. Meanwhile, in Saudi Arabia, world leaders and other dignitaries are streaming in to pay their respects to the late King Abdullah. Among them, French President Francois Hollande, who arrived in Riyadh earlier Saturday, and Britain's Prince Charles. The dignitaries will not only extend sympathies to the family of the deceased king, but pay respects to the new monarch, his half-brother, King Salman. Abdullah is being remembered by leaders for his efforts towards Middle East peace, as well as bringing about modest reform in a deeply conservative Saudi Arabia.